Perfect. Let's get started with statistics and lesson 10. So I'm going to copy this code and we're going to go into Excel, blank worksheet, and get started. Okay. So we're talking about body mass index. So it says 1.1. Use the count function in cell H5 to calculate the number of men. So in H5 count, and I'm going to use C4 through C203. Hit enter. That's a count. Use the average function in cell H6 to calculate the average weight. So average for our weight. Hit enter. So that's a formula again. And I'm just gonna copy that across because we will be doing that in the future. So that's 1.2 done. Then it says use the standard deviation sample in cell H7 to calculate the sample standard deviation of the weight. So I'm going to do in H7, I'm going to say stand this deviation dot s, um, standard deviation s, and we're going to do it for weight again. So we're going to do C4 through C203. That is our formula up here. That's 1.3. Then it says 1.4. It says use the confidence dot norm. So confidence dot norm function to calculate the 95%. So if we're doing 95%, our alpha is going to be 0.05. And our size, we're going to reference the count in H5. So we're using, so our standard deviation is going to be in H7. And our size is going to be H5, just like that. And I'm going to make that sticky, so we do function F4. So again, function F4 to make it sticky. And we say enter. So it should look like this. 0.4 done, and it says use the average function in cell I6 to calculate the average height. So we did that one already. And 1.6, use the standard deviation dot sample function. So again, we can simply drag it across because our columns match the columns here. So if we copy it across, we're fulfilling, for example, in this case, we're averaging for column E, which is BMI, and column J also has the summary of BMI. So that's how it works. So we did 1.6, and again we can. So it says use the confidence dot norm function to count in cell I11 to calculate the 95 confidence interval for the height of men. And since we have our size as sticky and our standard deviation just changes one spot to the right, if I copy this across, it works just fine. So 1.7 done. In case you want to copy it, this is the formula. Again, 1.8, we already have the average for BMI right here. And we already have the average or the standard deviation just here. And we already have the confidence dot norm. So we already have the confidence interval just here. And if we go into the function, we see it applies appropriately. So So that's 1.10 down. Then it says use a correlation. So we want to use correlation in cell J11 to determine if there is a statistical relationship between the height and weight. And so between height and weight, so we do B4, that's our first array, D4 through D202, comma, our second array will be C4 through C202. You can change, they're interchangeable. So hit enter on that. That's 1.11 done. And it says use the forecast dot linear function in cell J15 to predict Jim's weight. Reference Jim's height in cell J14 as the value for x. And okay, so forecast dot linear. So our x is J14. Our known y's, since we want to predict his height. No, so from his height, we want to predict his weight. So we have already his height. Our y's are going to be the weight because that's what we're predicting. And our known x's are going to be, we already have heights. So it's going to be height. And that's our prediction. In cells C18 and C19, use the information you calculate about the confidence interval for weight to determine the lower and upper bounds for the 95% confidence interval for your prediction of Jim's weight in cell J15. Be sure to reference the confidence interval calculation rather than hard-coding the values. So we have the lower bound. We're simply going to do the weight. So we're going to reference H8. Or wait, which one is it? Oh, we're doing Jim's weight. So we just want to do our prediction minus our CI. So if we're doing weight, we'd be J15, which is what we predicted, minus H8, which is our 95% confidence interval. Then for our upper bound, it's going to be exactly the same, but we are going to sum. So we're going to do equals J15 plus our H8, which is our 95% confidence interval. And that's 1 point, the section 1 done. Then we move on to baseball. Here has a little bit of information about baseball. So it says in cell I4, use the count function to calculate the number of teams in 1990. So we're going to say count, and we want to use E, but we want to use E4 through E33. And then it says in cell I6, use the count function. So use count function to calculate the number of MLB teams. Reference range D4 through D33 or 33. So that's 2.2. Then in cell I8, we're going to use that average function to calculate the average salary for the teams in 1990. So we're going to average E4 through E33, which gives us our average salary here. And then in cell I10, we're going to also do an average and for the payroll for teams in 2019, which is D4 through D33. In cell I12, we're going to use the standard deviation, and we're using population this time because we have all the population of teams compared to we did it in the previous example. We did not have all the population for men, so we're going to do it with wins. We're going to use G4 through G33. And we're going to do the same for teams in 2019 for the number of wins. We're going to use as standard deviation P. And we're going to use it for teams in 2019 with their wins. So F4 through F33. Then 2.6 says based on your standard deviation calculations for teams more similar in terms of wins in 1990 or 2019 teams. So the smaller the standard deviation, the more similar each data is. So since in 1990 it's smaller than 2019, in 1990 teams were more similar in terms of wins. So 1990. And so I-18 used the correlation function to determine if there's a relationship between the number of wins in 2019, so number of wins, and the size of the team salary. So we're going to use D4. So we're going to do correlation, and we're going to do F4 through F33, comma D4 through D33, just like that. Then we're going to do the same for teams in 1990. So we're going to do correlation between the number of wins in 1990, so G4 through G33, and the number and the size of their payroll, so E4 through E33. So 2.9 done. So is the relationship between wins and salary stronger in 1990 or 2019? The way we find if a relationship is stronger, we look how far away it is from zero. So 0.02 is closer to zero than 0.44, which means 2019 has a stronger relationship between wins and salary. 2.9 done. Oh, we put 2.10. Then it says in cell I-27 used a forecast linear and linear function determines how many games a team could expect to win in 2019 if their salaries is $150 million. So our X is going to be just under this, so I-28, comma, our known Y's are the number of wins in 2019, and our known X's are our salary. So D4 through D33, this is the function. Hit enter, and we can expect to win about 82 games. In cell I-33, use confidence dot norm a function to determine the 95% confidence interval for wins in 2019. So our alpha is 0.05 since it's 95%. Our standard deviation we're using 2019 is cell I-14. And our size of teams in 2019 was stored in I6. So 0.05, comma I14, comma I6. 5.9, 5.59. And it says in cell 33, calculate the upper limit. So we want to calculate the upper limit confidence interval for your win prediction. So we're going to do I-27 plus I-31 because that's the upper. And if we want to do our lower, we want to reference our prediction minus our confidence interval. So we can be 95% sure, or 95% of the times, our prediction is going to fall between these numbers, 100%. And very simply put, so that's 2.13 and 2.14 done. Let's see what we get if we have to fix anything before we post this video. Okay, 100%. So let's now do the 11. Let's do pivot tables, which this one's going to be very fun, very straightforward. And I'll try again. Okay, copy it. So we're in chapter 11 now. You don't have to do 12. Chapter 11. Where's my mouse? Start. So we're just doing pivot tables. So I'm going to kind of rush through this. So, and just information about our employees. And we have their shift, their name, location, region, their position, their experience, like years of experience, and their salary. So it says using the data. So we have to make about 7 pivot tables. And so it says using the employee data on the worksheet, insert a pivot table on the number of employees worksheet to calculate the number of employees in each region. There are no blank salary cells, so we can do count of those to count the number of employee accounts. So it says place region, so grab all the data, select from B2 all the way through I, and 1202 to the bottom. So that's a lot of data. Make sure you have all selected. And it said in the number of employees worksheet, we are going to place a pivot table. So we go to insert up here, pivot table, and just have it selected. Okay, there we go. And so make sure you're still in employee data. And we're going to select existing worksheet in our location. Now we're going to go into employees. Now I'm going to just put it in B2. So now it says place region as the row. So region, we're going to drag that to rows, then salary to values. And we want to do not a sum, we want to do value field settings. And we want to do a count of salaries. Hit OK. And that gives us the number of employees that we have. That's 1.1 done. That says 1.2. It says, and we're going to calculate, we're going to insert a pivot table on the experience worksheet. So let's select all of this table again. We will be doing this a lot. So we go to insert pivot table, and it says we want to go into an existing worksheet. We want to go into the experience worksheet, and I'm just going to put it in B2. And it says construct a pivot table with location as row labels. So location as rows. Then it says position as column labels. So drag position into columns. Then it says use an appropriate representation of experience. So we want to calculate the average work experience by position. So we're going to drag experience into values. And we don't want to do the sum. We want to do the average. So we have the average here because it says average work experience. 1.3 it says using the employee data worksheet, insert a pivot table in the max salary worksheet to calculate the maximum salary by shift and position. So we're going to do select the entire table. We're going to insert our pivot table on existing worksheet, and we want to go to max salary B2. And so it says position row as rows and shift as columns. So position as rows, position as rows, and shift as column. Right, shift as column. And we want to see the maximum salary by shift. So if we want to do maximum salary, we drag salary into values. We change sum of salary, so we go to value field settings, and we want to do max. And that gives us like the max and enter makes in the afternoon, in the morning, regional manager, again, afternoon or morning shift. So here we go. So that's 1.3 done. 1.4. So it says using the data. So select everything. And it says insert a pivot table. So insert a pivot table in the average salary worksheet. So we're going to go to existing worksheet, average salary. Oh, make sure you select location, average salary. And I'm just going to put it in B2. So we're going to have to put position in rows again and shift in. So position in rows and shift and columns. So position in rows, shift in columns. Very similar to the previous one, actually. And we want to do the average salary of employees. So average salary. So we drag salary into values and we change that. So value field settings to be the average. Hit OK. So that's 1.4. Then it says 1.5. Using the data. So select all the data. Make sure you have everything selected. And insert a pivot table in the position worksheet. So insert pivot table. Existing worksheet. Location is going to be the position one. And we want to put position as row and region as column. So make sure that we're in position B2. And we're going to do position in row. And it said region and column. Region and column. Okay. So what do we want to figure out from this? It says calculate the percentage of employees for each type. So we're going to calculate the percentage of employees for each type of position by region, so by column. So it says use an appropriate presentation of salary as the values field. So we're going to do salary in values, but we're going to do again count. But not only are we going to just do count, we are going to go to show value as, and we're going to show it as percentage of column total, because we want to see them by column, like how many interns, how many percent of our employees are interns in the East region. Same for Midwest, South, and West, and that's for all regions, because we want to see the percentage of employees for each type of position. Where is this? Oh, so by region. So 1.5 done. 1.6 using the data. So I'll select it all. Make sure everything's selected. Insert a pivot table on the manager's worksheet. So we're going to insert pivot table in the manager's worksheet. Manager's worksheet, just in B2. Right, okay. Okay, what do we want from this? We want location as rows and region as columns. So location as rows and region, we drag that into column. What else is it asking? It says use the sum of experience as the pivot table value. So sum of experience, so we drag experience, so sum of experience. And then it says use the filter to display only regional managers. So we want to add position as a filter. So go to position, go to drag that into filters. And we only want to show, so click on C1, click on this little arrow. And we want to select multiple items and deselect all. Only select regional and sales managers. Hit OK. That filters down our data. There we go, 1.6. And it says using the data. So we're going to use the data and insert a pivot table in the salesperson's worksheet to calculate the percent of grand total. So percent of grand total each position makes up in each region. So I'm going to go into an existing worksheet. Again, we want to do this in the very last one. So in salespersons. And it says position as rows and region as columns. So position as rows and regions as columns. What else do we need? It says use an appropriate representation of salary. And it said I want to do salary as percent of grand total each position makes up. So in each region. So we're going to drag salary into values. We're going to leave it, we're going to change it from sum to count. And we're going to change our value, show value as percent of grand total because it explicitly told us to. So this is the percent of grand total. So now there's just some questions we have to answer. So it says, go to number of employees. How many employees are in the West region? So we go to West, 370. Number two, consider the pivot table on experience worksheet. What is the average number of years experience for salespersons in Phoenix? So we go to Phoenix, we find salesperson. It's 15.4 on average. 15.4. Then it says consider the pivot table on the max salary worksheet. So max salary worksheet. What is the maximum salary for regional managers who work the morning shift? So regional managers who work morning is 160K. So it's the third option. 5. Consider the pivot tables on the average salary worksheet. So average salary worksheet. Is there evidence that employees working one shift make more than employees working the other? We just look at the grand totals for each type of shift, and morning afternoon is always making more than the morning shift. So you say yes, there is evidence. And it says consider the pivot table on the position worksheet and approximately what percentage. So approximately what percentage of employees are salesperson in the South. So salesperson. So in the South region, how many are salesperson? It's 96.65. So I'm going to say 97%. So because we round up. Then it says consider the table on the manager's worksheet. How many total years experience do managers in the East region have? So East region on how many total years they have 78. We just look at grand totals by each region. And we want to look at East. So East 78. Consider the pivot table on salesperson. And what percentage of salaries are paid to the employees that hold the position of salesperson? So salesperson is 95% of all compensation, or 95% of how many people make in the company. So you say, wait a minute, what percentage of salaries are paid to employees who have the position of salesperson? Did we do this one wrong? What percentage of salaries are paid? So percentage of salaries are paid to employees that hold the position of salesperson. Salesperson. This all adds up. It's 95. I'm gonna go and approximate it to 96.85. What went wrong here? So you can ignore this if you want. It says position as row labels. Position as row labels. Oh, we don't want to do how many people. So we don't want to do, yeah, no, it's some. Okay, I see what we did wrong. So in the last pivot table, so in position, I mean in salespersons, we don't want to do a count of salary. We want to do a sub. And of the sum, we show the value as percent of grand total. So hit OK. Now that's the number we want to look at. Okay, yeah, now our numbers match. So make sure it's on the last pivot table, make sure it's sum of salary. And I did not encounter any technical errors. So I'm going to submit this. And we got 100. So yeah, good luck. Reach out if you have any questions.